Welcome to Thoughts on the Market. I'm Ariana Salvatore, Morgan Stanley's U.S. Public Policy Strategist. Along with my colleagues bringing you a variety of perspectives, today I'll focus on what the U.S. election means for healthcare. It's Tuesday, September 17th at 10 a.m. in New York. Around elections, what we tend to see is voters rank healthcare pretty high among their priority list. And for that reason, it's not surprising that it generates significant debate as well as investor concern about everything from drug pricing to potential sweeping reforms. We think that the 2024 election is unlikely to transform the U.S. healthcare system, but there are still policies to watch that could change depending on the outcome. We outlined these in a recent note led by our equity research colleagues Aaron Wright and Terrence Flynn. To start, we think bipartisan policies should continue uninterrupted regardless of the election outcome. Certain regulations requiring drug price and procedural transparency, for example, which affect hospitals and health plans, are unlikely to change if there is a shift of power next year. We've seen some regulations from the Trump era kept in place by the Biden administration, and similarly, during the former president's term, there were attempts at bipartisan legislation to modify the pharmacy benefit management model. There are some healthcare policies that could be changed through the tax code, including the extension of the COVID-era ACA subsidies. In President Biden's fiscal year 25 budget request, he called for an extension of those enhanced subsidies, and Vice President Kamala Harris has proposed a similar measure. As we've said before on this podcast, we think tax policy will feature heavily in the next Congress as lawmakers contend with the expiring Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, so many of these policies could come into the fold in negotiations. Aside from these smaller potential policy changes, we think material differences to the healthcare system as we know it right now are a lower probability outcome. That's because the creation of a new system like Medicare for All or a public option would require a unified Democratic control of Congress, as well as party unanimity on these topics. Right now, we see a dispersion among Democrats in terms of their views on this topic, and the presence of other more motivating issues for voters mean that an overhaul of the current system is probably less likely. Similarly, in a Republican sweep scenario, we don't expect a successful repeal of the Affordable Care Act, as was attempted in Trump's first administration. The makeup of Congress certainly is important, but there are some actions that the president can leverage unilaterally to affect policy here. For example, former President Trump issued several executive orders addressing transparency and the PBM model. If we look at some key industries within healthcare, our equity colleagues think managed care is well-positioned heading into this relatively more benign election cycle. Businesses and investors are focusing on candidates' approaches to the Medicare Advantage program and the ACA exchange, which has subsidies set to expire at the end of 2025. Relative to prior elections, biopharma should see a lower level of uncertainty from a policy perspective, given that the Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA, in 2022 included meaningful drug pricing provisions. We also think a full-scale repeal of the IRA is unlikely even in a Republican sweep scenario, so expect some policy continuity there. Within biotech, the path to rate cuts is likely a more significant driver of near-term small and mid-cap sentiment rather than the 2024 election cycle. Our colleagues think that investors should keep an eye on two election-related factors that could possibly impact biotech, including potential changes to the IRA that may impact the sector, and changes at the FTC or the Federal Trade Commission that could make the M&A environment more challenging. As always, we will continue to keep you abreast of new developments as the election gets closer. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts and share thoughts on the market with a friend or colleague today.
The preceding content is informational only and based on information available when created. It is not an offer or solicitation, nor is it tax or legal advice. It does not consider your financial circumstances and objectives and may not be suitable for you.